melody, willingness to innovate.
Welcome to Backstage. It's a podcast where we go behind the scenes to meet the artists and performers who'll be taking to the stage at Sage Gateshead in the coming weeks, as well as discovering some of the terrific activities that take place and the fantastic communities that meet there. My name's Ian Wiley, and the theme for this latest episode is connections. We're going to explore how music introduces and brings people together. Music can often be that shared language that breaks down barriers and helps people to connect, but also empowers and emboldens them to work together and do even better things. So on this podcast episode, I'll be learning the language of gospel music with local choir Voices of Virtue.
So we would tell you to say pray, precious as an A.
Pray,
Pray.
pray,
There you go, pray. Shush.
precious,
Precious lamb.
precious lamb.
You got it.
Fiddle player and composer Aidan O'Rourke of contemporary folk band Lau will be explaining to me how some Celtic connections compelled him to write 365 songs in just 1 year.
You open your heart and soul when you're in a rehearsal room or in a recording studio. It's really, you feel very exposed and vulnerable. So it takes particular types of people for me to be able to work with.
And we'll talk to Paul Wolinski of experimental rock band 65 Days of Static to hear how a video game led to collaborating with algorithms.
I'm not sure we see the music industry the way that most people inside the music industry seem to see it.
So plug into our podcast episode for the next half hour as we help you make your connections.
Yeah, now behold the lamb is
Okay. What key are we going to do with it?
Now behold the lamb.
So, do you want to sing top and I'll hold melody?
Mm-hmm.
Now behold the Lamb.
Now behold the lamb.
So that's what you hold.
Now behold
The Lamb. Okay, 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Now behold the Lamb, the precious Lamb of God, born into sin that I may live again, the precious Lamb of God.
Regarded as one of the region's leading gospel choirs, members of Voices of Virtue are drawn from churches across the northeast. Their repertoire includes classic and contemporary gospel songs, as well as songs from the civil rights era. I met with the choir's founders, Matty and Chi-Chi, at their church, King's Castle in Biker.
The precious Lamb of God. Hi, I'm Matty, and we're co-founders of Voices of Virtue Gospel Choir.
I'm Chi-Chi, co-founder of Voices of Virtue Gospel Choir. Honestly, the truth is we just love to sing, and we just love the ability to just express oneself through song.
Coming from South Africa, a country where music played a very significant role in the apartheid struggle, it gave me the soul in the sound that I present, in music. And I was singing from choirs, being 6 years old and being in like the adult choir. In South Africa, the first thing you find out is what part do you sing. You have first part, which is soprano, second part, alto, third part, tenor. So from the time you even speak, when you're in schools, we have choir competitions. It's a big thing. Singing is huge. It's a big part of the culture. I joined the King's Castle Church choir. That's where I met Chi-Chi, because she was the choir leader of the King's Castle Church. I think for me, music was the icebreaker that helped me to build relationships that today I can say, all the girls and all of them were family.
Well, I'm Nigerian. I'm from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, and we would always go home at Christmas. It's something that Igbos do all around the world. They will always travel home to their village where they originate from, as it were, for Christmas. And so when my dad would be sat outside with all of his clansmen and all the, I would come out and he'd be like, Chi, sing for me. And for me that was like my, my first stage, as it were. And I'd start to sing carols that I may have learned at school. And, you would just see all the old men sort of swaying from side to side. And, and it always brought such joy, and it would bring people together. Oh, Chi singing again, come. Voices of Virtue was really birthed from this sisterhood between myself and Matty. She was singing at work one day, and a manager said to her, "Oh wow, do you do this?" She's like, "Yeah, we do. We sing weddings, we do," and she just ran her mouth, and then calls me and goes, "Chichi, we've got a wedding to sing at."
She was like, "We,"
and I'm like, "We." She's like, "We don't have a band, but that's just by the by." And so anyway, that's basically how it began. Backing tracks and just myself and Matty. And then before you know it, we got this wedding that wanted a choir. The wedding practically wanted the entire Sister Act set list. And Matty was like, "Yeah."
And she was like, "There's only 2 of us. Are you okay?"
And anyway, so yeah, we put some friends together, people that we obviously knew could sing. That's how
Voices of Virtue
that's how Voices of Virtue came together. At the very foundation of gospel is love. That's basically the bedrock of gospel. It's love. And you might have differences, you might have things that you don't see eye to eye on, but when you have that basic principle of love your neighbor as yourself, it helps to bring everything together. There's a song that we do, it's in our repertoire, it's by a gentleman called Travis Green, and says, "Love will always win." So it's like, regardless of what is going on around, love will always win.
The love of gospel music has brought Voices of Virtue together with a range of collaborators, including most recently house DJ Smooth.
I think for me, what I loved about our collaboration with Smooth is the different style that he brought that enhanced what we already had. And, fusing together that house and, all those beats and the gospel together, it's a wonderful fusion. What I loved about Smooth as well is how he was such an open, soul. And I think that's another thing where, when you're coming in with a genre and your love is at the forefront, it conquers all things. Because obviously Smooth is like, gospel, great. I'm not overtly religious. We don't impose our religion or our walk on anybody. Love is what keeps us on a common ground. And he was like, "Why don't you guys write a gospel song?" And a lot of people we come across always kind of want to lean towards Motown. Why don't you guys write a Motown song or a soul song? He kind of saw what our strength was, where we could relate pen to paper. And he was like, "Key in, focus, let's do it on that. And we'll mix it up and jazz it up and put some, house beats to it." And it was amazing.
Yeah.
The choir's latest collaboration will take place at Sage Gateshead on the afternoon of Saturday the 1st of December, when they're inviting anyone who loves to sing to a Christmas gospel workshop that will culminate in a performance on the concourse.
We are so excited about the opportunity to do that, and especially the fact that the choir get to present at the end on the concourse, at the end of the workshop. And we're hoping to, kind of enlighten, the guests that come through on what the ingredients are that brings out the gospel sound. Because we've come across different artists before who've said, "Look, our choirs try to do a gospel song, but we're just not quite hitting it." And so we have those secret ingredients, and so we're looking to bring that out. And we're doing some really exciting versions of carols that they may know, and some contemporary gospel songs as well, with the opportunity for people to do solos as well. So
I'm excited about it. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm practicing, and I'm practicing to be good, to be a good teacher. They may not have, sang a minute in their lives. It's about having fun. If you sing in the shower, come on. We want you to come out. Okay, so but if they're already in choirs, great, especially if they come with an open mind, but anybody and everybody. Now behold the Lamb, the precious Lamb of God, born into sin that I may live again. You are the precious Lamb of God. Oh,
when I always didn't do right, I went left, you told me to go right. Now I'm standing right here in the midst of my tears, and I claim you to be the Lamb of God.
Over the last decade, folk band Lau have proved themselves willing to collaborate with a wide range of artists and creatives, from orchestras, choirs and authors, to jazz musicians and animators. I called fiddle player and composer Aidan O'Rourke to find out more about the source of that appetite for connecting with others.
Being a folk musician or a traditional musician, it's a very social scene, so you do tend to meet and get together with musicians that you might have been familiar with or met at sessions or at a festival. There's so much social music making in the folk scene that there's a wide range of friendships are struck up all around the world. And that's one of the most unique and beautiful things about playing folk music. You do connect musically with strangers much more often than I think you do in other genres. So as far as Lau is concerned, we knew each other socially. We knew each other's music through playing in sessions and playing at parties and seeing each other playing in other bands. So there was a real we had a real sense of each other before we formed the band. We each knew each other's direction was slightly different to the other members of the bands that we played in. I was playing in Blazing Fiddles, and I was kind of introducing these slightly crooked tunes, slightly less traditional tunes to the band, I guess, that would quite often be thrown out. And Martin was doing a similar thing with his music. Chris was doing a similar thing with his songwriting and his tune writing. So there was a common sense that we were doing something slightly different, or we had our own take on things which had a familiar feel to each other's music making. So we found this quite solid foundation early on. Being in Lau has opened up a huge range of collaborative options. I mean, working with Jack Bruce from Cream, working with Trilok Gurtu, all these people have come to us for collaboration over the years, and I think it's because we're quite a unique lineup. We don't have drums and bass. Our music doesn't really sound like anyone else. So I think there's lots of room for other musicians to slot into Lau, even though it feels like quite a solid, thick sound. We can make it feel really open and really spacious, and that allows other people to sit in either on the bottom end, from a bass point of view, or on drums, or compositionally. So I think we work well in a collaborative setting. It's working with someone that's going to drag me into out of my comfort zone, really. I think that at this stage of my career and Lau's career, it's been taken out of areas where we were most comfortable, so we can learn, so we can open up other musical elements. It's definitely to widen the palette further than it is, and to make absolutely new sounding music, make music that stretches us and stretches the collaborator.
Most recently, Aidan has been performing with jazz musician Kit Downs and novelist James Robertson. So what does he look for in a collaboration?
Music definitely opens up really strong relationships. It's such an emotional connection. You open your heart and soul when you're in a rehearsal room or in a recording studio. It's really, you feel very exposed and vulnerable. So it takes particular types of people for me to be able to work with closely like that. And that's how I began working with Kit. He has worked with my melodies, with my kind of single line implied harmony melodies, and he has taken them harmonically to somewhere that I would never initially have thought of. You know, he comes from obviously a jazz world, but also from a Ravel, Debussy, classical music world. And in the last year and a half or 2 years that we've been working together, I've delved into these aspects of the music because he's opened them up to me, and now the way I write is informed by that collaboration. I've been working closely with an author called James Robertson. In 2013, he set himself the task of writing 365 word short story each day for a year. I was given it for Christmas in 2015, started reading it on the 1st of January 2016. Kind of fell in love with the form, fell in love with the brevity, the succinctness of his writing, how he could get such strong emotion, feeling across in such a short story. You know, it takes you 3 minutes to read this thing. So it was a beautiful little meditation every day. I would feel something really strongly from it. So I met him at Celtic Connections. He was doing a collaboration with Corinne Polwart, and I told him I was loving his writing. I'd read a couple of the novels before then as well. And as February kind of progressed, I was feeling I would like to write a musical response to these stories, and I might try and do it every day for a year. I met James in February and told him I was going to start on the 1st of March and write a tune every day, and he told me to don't do it. You'd be mad. But I did it anyway, and by the end of February the next year I had 365 new tunes, which is what I'm working on mainly with Kit. I barely knew James at the start of that project, and I didn't know what the outcome would be. I didn't have any plans for the tunes. It was a personal project, but I got to know James through the project, and we have a show with James Robertson and Kit Downs that we're touring. He comes from things from very much visual aspect than I do when I'm presenting a show. It's been really interesting how he, it's a kind of semi-theatrical way of staging things and presenting things. I think I need to connect on a kind of socio-political way as well. I think I'd find it really hard to work musically and spend a lot of time with someone whose politics completely contrasted with mine. I mean, it would lead to some interesting conversations, I'm sure, but you're kind of baring your soul to someone when you're collaborating, and I think if you couldn't connect to how that other person's soul operated, then it would find it really hard. As musicians, and who are playing to varying numbers of people, that we do feel as a role to put our opinions across and to try and we've connected up with Hope Not Hate and Amnesty and various other charities over the years. We think it's part of our role to help lead things in one way or another.
And when Aidan and Lau return to Sage Gateshead on Wednesday the 5th of December, they'll be playing tracks from a new album, Midnight and Close Down, due to be released in February, that deals with themes of isolation, togetherness and forgiveness.
It is about human beings connecting and listening and understanding, listening to each other's differences rather than making them a problem. You know, that can be done with words, it can be done with music, and it can be done with attitudes, but it's about connecting.
When experimental rock band 65 Days of Static collaborated with developer Hello Games to compose a soundtrack for video game No Man's Sky, they found themselves immersed in a world of alien life forms. But I asked founding member Paul Wolinski how music brought the band together in the first place.
To begin with, you identify with other bands. You know, that's what a band is. It's the poster on your wall as a teenager, and going to live shows and standing in a crowd full of people who you feel a kind of camaraderie with because you all like the same kind of music. What music is so much more than the actual music bit. It's the entire ritual that surrounds the enjoyment of it, the listening of it, the discussing of it. We've existed in that for like 15 years now as a band, and it certainly influences how we think about the things we make. You know, it's like so much of being 65 is more than the actual making music part. It's about all of those other social relations that come with putting stuff into the world and trying to communicate with other people through this slightly ephemeral language that we all kind of find meaning in together. I think we might be different from a lot of bands. I'm not sure we see the music industry the way that most people inside the music industry seem to see it, because the networking sort of part of the music industry is, you know, there's loads of people playing that game, and it's a game that we've been very bad at. So we don't have the kind of lobbying network around us that might get us, you know, cool soundtrack projects or something. Which is a shame on the one hand, but on the other hand, it means that when these things do emerge, it feels a bit more that it's kind of emerged for good reasons. No Man's Sky, for example, the director of the game, a guy called Sean Murray, he's about the same age as us, and has been into music his whole life, and I think we've just been part of his musical landscape. You know, we were one of his favourite bands for about a decade, and eventually he's found himself in a position in his career where he has the power to pull together this aesthetic for the game, of which our music was a part. And so he originally got in touch to use one of our old songs as the soundtrack to the trailer, but we were at a stage where we were looking for this kind of work, and so just asked directly if they had anyone to do the soundtrack yet, and they didn't, and so we just started talking, and it kind of went from there, really. It was great to work with someone who had such a strong and clear vision for what they wanted. It was very fortunate for us that vision was basically, it meant that we had to write a record that sounded like 65 Days of Static, because we know how to do that. If it was something different, I don't know. I think what we learned was that we're not composers for hire. You know, we'd love to do more soundtracks, but we're very much control freaks at the same time. There's a tension there between doing our own thing and being a small part of a bigger vision.
Writing the soundtrack for No Man's Sky has led to a new collaboration, this time with algorithms.
We'd learned so much about like generative music techniques and algorithmically generated material during that game, but there were very fixed parameters for us we had to sit inside. So once we were out of that, we were quite keen to push it in our own direction, to sort of experiment with what these techniques could mean for being a band in our own right, rather than part of a video game project. And it's been an interesting experiment. What we found is this kind of collaboration with algorithms is it's really useful. It was exciting because we could build these little musical systems that would surprise us and make music that sounded like us, but at the same time wasn't necessarily built from ingredients directly made by us. And this kind of back and forth conversation with the algorithms became a really interesting way of working. It helped us generate a lot of material. These shows have been us sort of antagonising ourselves and the expectations of what a live show could be, should be. But ultimately, rather than it becoming a piece of, you know, academic research or some sort of self-indulgent art gallery installation, our emphasis was always on the making sure that the final musical production was good, was like subjectively good to our ears.
"65 Days of Static" bring their decomposition theory show to Sage Gateshead on Saturday the 24th of November, when Paul says the audience will be very much part of the collaboration.
There's a researcher who I think is called Christopher Small, who came up with the term musicking as a verb, which he uses to encompass not just the act of composing or performing music, but all of the associated activities in a very broad definition. And so, you know, the kind of interaction between the audience and the musicians on stage is absolutely musicking. You know, everyone's doing that together. If there was no audience, there'd be no show, and that's something that we keep in mind. It's a very different 65 show, but I would say that that's a reason to come and see it, because it's good. You know, like the last thing that we would want to do is take like a self-indulgent experimental project on the road for no reason. It would be so much easier for us to just go and play normal shows. The reason that we're doing this is because we feel like it's not the time for bands to just be treading water for diminishing returns in a slowly dying music industry. Like, that's all, like, there's too many things happening in the world for that to be anyone's concern. In the little part of the world that we exist in, we feel like, I don't know, some sort of small responsibility to at least try and experiment with ways to keep things interesting, to sort of push the form forward.
You've been listening to Backstage, a podcast brought to you by Sage Gateshead. Details of all events, activities and tickets can be found online at www.sagegateshead.com. The incidental music you've been hearing on this podcast is by local artist Wolf House. Now, if you like the episode you've heard today, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts to make sure you hear all future episodes, and feel free to write us a review telling us and others what you think about the podcast. My name's Ian Wiley. Thanks again for listening.